So, we'll start by addressing the obvious. I am covered in sweat. I just did a workout. For the past 2 weeks, I've just been spiraling downwards. I used to have a good, healthy routine. I achieved some goals, and I was consistent for a bit. For the past 2 weeks. And I think the way I look at myself, let's say, as an individual person. I remember my stepfather once told me when I was a kid, addictions exist. We pick addictions to fill holes in ourselves, something like that. And I don't know, I was like 14, 15. Thought that was interesting. But the point is, whether you're organized or not, we all have a timetable. We all have a certain amount of time available. And with a certain degree of power, let's say, with varying degrees of power, we decide what we do with that time. A lot of people, they relinquish that power to a large extent. And they do things they don't want to do, including myself. The dream is to have total ownership or total control over what you do with your time. That's the dream. That's why I want, and that's why people aim to make more money, right? So that you are in control of what you do with your time. But still, I'm in a position where I do have a lot of control over my time. I'm very grateful, very lucky to be in that position. But I still use that power badly, stupidly. But anyways, I'll go back to my life philosophy, as I've mentioned previously many times. As far as I can tell, sleeping approximately 8 hours is optimal. There's lots of research, lots of people talk about it. I've never read a research paper, and I've never done extensive research on it. The experts seem to agree that we all need 8 hours of sleep, and that if you sleep less, you live less. You shorten your life. There's lots of information out there. Talks of your circadian rhythm and all kinds of things. Actually, they say that you sleep in 1 hour and a half cycles, which you can't divide 8 hours by 1 hour and a half. It's 7 hours and a half. But I do find that when I do my routine, which is to go to sleep at 9:30, I usually wake up at 6, naturally, around 6. So after 7.5 hours. Or I won't fall asleep at 9:30. Although actually, when I was really consistent with my sleep schedule, I would go to sleep. I would fall asleep as soon as I went to bed almost, and I would wake up promptly, which was very strange because all my life I had a hard time falling asleep. But I'm back to having a hard time falling asleep now. That just shows how having a routine just simplifies things. If your body is acclimated to a rhythm, and if you're consistent, it makes life easier. Otherwise, you're kind of fighting your body. So, where was I going with that? So yes, we all have a certain amount of power over what we do with our time. I believe that one of my top priorities, based on what I've heard and what I've experienced also, is that there has to be an 8-hour chunk of time, approximately. Yes, 8 hours, we'll say, for sleep. That's one of the priorities. And I'm able to do that at the moment. I'm able to do that. And I'm able to go to sleep at a good time so that I can wake up early, because I do believe that waking up early is optimal as well. I used to not be able to do so with my work, finishing at midnight. But I've made it clear to my boss that I want to do that again, even though every week there's a special reason why he wants me to come. And last week was the last of those instances. How would I say this? I accepted because there was no lunch service for 2 days previously in previous week. So I wouldn't have gotten paid if I didn't come. That would have been 2 days off, which I do need money. I work the least amount that I can to be able to afford my lifestyle, which is quite cheap. But so yes, last week we had Friday and Saturday, the last 2 days of the week, we had a takeover, which is when another restaurant, the chefs from another restaurant come over and cook their own food. And recording, big boy? Looks like it. So yes, chefs from another restaurant came in, cooked their own food. And we, the waiters, so we used to the Taste of China menu, which is, there's a lot of information that we need to get out when we serve the food. And it was really daunting for me at first when I learned that menu, it's a lot of information. But so we were given the new menu for those 2 days, I think 2 days in advance. And there were some dishes that, there were some of our dishes and some of from the other restaurant. And at first I was panicked because I thought there's no way I'll learn this in 2 days. And it was Spanish dishes as well. We served dishes from China normally. So different pronunciations and things of that nature, many words that I had to look up to know what they meant. But all this to say that we all got the menu 2 days in advance. And I remember on the day of, so during the briefings before that day, for that week, maybe 3 days in advance. And so I'm not sure, 2 or 3 days. Anyway, so the briefings before that day, we kind of rehearsed for 15 minutes. Our manager would talk us through the menu. And the day of, before service, all us waiters kind of got together and decided to go through the menu together. And, I realized that everyone was everyone was equally unsure as I was. And, well, a few things. One, it was much easier than expected to learn it. It was less complicated than our normal menu. So that's one. And two, I also found that I was actually more comfortable with the menu than everyone else almost, except a few people. And so dinner started, the guests came in, and I work outside with Ben, Uncle Ben, and that's kind of his section outside. I'm here to help him. He's the one in charge, and so when I do dinner with him, I always let him go first to the table, serve the first dishes. I start serving when I'm needed. It's kind of, he controls the pace and everything. And so I figured, well, that's a good thing because today, he has authority in that section to a degree. Therefore, he has responsibility over that section as well, right? He, just like every night when we work together, he serves the first table. I don't know how to say this, but I don't know. Maybe I could ask to do it. I could say, I'll do it first. He won't say anything. But it's like, to me, it is just the way it works. He's my elder. He's the one who, the most important piece in that section. And so he goes ahead first. But he was not very comfortable with the menu. And so I served it first. I was the first person in the restaurant to serve that menu. Which, a few months ago would have been unthinkable for me to say, hey, I'll do this before everyone. I'll take the risk, so to speak. Which, once again, it wasn't actually that difficult to learn the menu. But I have a terrible memory and I'm not good under pressure. So I thought anyone but me should go first. Because, I'm not good at this. And a year ago, I was, very uncomfortable with serving anything. But nonetheless, I went first. The food arrived and he looked at it and he thought, I'm not very confident. So I thought, fine, I'll do it. And I didn't really hesitate. I just did it. And how could I say this? I keep going back to the first time I ever served food in the restaurant and how that was hard. Just serving a dim sum and telling the name of the dish. How hard that was. How it seemed impossible to do it until I did it. And how after I did it, it was so hard to keep evolving, to keep, getting more comfortable with it. Countless times I ran away when there was a tray because I was too scared to do it. And just in my life, generally, countless times I've run away from things that I was unconfident with. And something presented itself, that tray with food, with foreign food I wasn't familiar with. I wasn't terribly that familiar with. And I didn't really hesitate, I just served it. And it wasn't great or anything. It wasn't great, I wasn't very confident or very comfortable. But it's just, I try to remind myself because, to be honest, I definitely feel like I'm a loser in terms of I'm 24 years old, I live at home, I hardly have any friends, very little money, and I've found a way to get, I have a very comfortable position where I should capitalize on the fact that I have a lot of time and space. I'm a creative person, and I found a way to only work 28 hours and per week and be able to afford, rent and food, and to go to sleep at reasonable times. I made some good choices to be in a good position, and yet I don't capitalize on it. And how to say this? I mean, a lot of people talk about perception and how do I say this? How your perception of any situation determines really how it affects you. If you believe in something, the placebo effect, if you believe in something, then it can affect you. If you don't, you can choose not to be affected. Obviously, our minds are not, most people's minds are not very powerful. Most people don't work on it, and most people lack faith in themselves and in many things, or they have faith in the wrong things. And I've always been a huge believer in the fact that I will get where, how do you say this? I will get where I want to be, and I'll be successful, and I will be great, and I will be remembered. Yeah, I've always believed that my whole life. And how do I say this? And as a result of that, or simultaneously, I believe that I'm always in the right place. How do I say this? I believe that everything that happens to me is for a good reason. And I'm always where I'm supposed to be. I'm always on the right path. And that whatever happens, I'll get there. I've always believed that. The idea of being a loser all my life is unthinkable. Like, I have a huge imagination, but I can't imagine myself. Like, I can't see myself being a loser much longer. And so I think of my current situation, and I think, good. I'm learning a lot of things. I'm experiencing what it's like to be on the other side of where I want to be. A lot of people talk about how being born rich is the worst thing because you can never appreciate what you got. And I would say that, I was definitely not born rich. But I wasn't born rich, and I wasn't born confident and, charismatic and any of those things. So I guess I'll never be able to appreciate what it's like. I will never be able to truly appreciate being creative because my entire life I've been highly creative. Right? I'm never gonna become creative. But, I'm happy enough being creative. I think that if I had to describe myself, that's the first word that would come to my mind. One of. Probably top of the list. But there's lots of people who I look up to, who are also born, in, how do you say, it's just born broke, in broke families, and they became successful, quite quickly, because they had this one attribute that got them there, or they had one or two attributes. But it seems that I'm completely unable to capitalize on my attributes. And once again, I'm saying this to kind of highlight that I'm not in an enviable position in terms of what I'm doing with my life, even though I'm fortunate. But at the same time, I think to myself, when I have everything I want, there's so many things that I'm working towards, or that I want, that I don't have, that it's going to be very enjoyable once I get there. There'll always be more things. I'm really rambling right now. Don't know if you can see, there's a pizza box here, some fries. There are countless pizza boxes around this room at the moment. Well, there's even one there. You can't see. So, I started this podcast by talking about how we all have a certain amount of time, various spectrum in terms of how much control we have over that time. I'm in a good position where I have a lot of control of my time, not many responsibilities. And as my stepfather once told me, addictions exist to fill holes we have. And so 2 weeks ago, I kind of became addicted to vaping, as ridiculous and pathetic as that sounds. Sorry if you vape, but we all know how one looks when they're vaping. So I decided to become addicted to vaping. And so that's kind of a chunk of time and energy and essentially life that I decided I would fill with that. And I had to fill that chunk of time with something, because I stopped doing the good things I was doing. And so on one end, that was a bad thing. But on the other hand, you just have to go back to doing the other thing. And so all these slots, if you fill them up with good things, there's no time for bad things. Because, how do I say this? Like, bad, negative habits, usually they feel good in the moment, and then you feel bad afterwards. Whether that's right after, an hour after, years later, these take a toll on you. And good habits, it's the opposite. Usually, in the moment, they might feel it's hard to learn to enjoy them. But in the long run, or afterwards, you feel good. So I kicked my chocolate habit at some point this year. I ate chocolate recently, didn't enjoy it, don't feel like doing it again. I haven't vaped in 2 days, which, when I say I was addicted to vaping, I was buying 2 or 3 every day for 2 weeks. Really. Well, I'm not going to say I've kicked that. It's only been 2 days. But more important than the addiction is what I'm doing to replace it. So I've given myself 5 tasks I need to complete every day. I don't remember where I heard that if you do anything for 20 minutes every day, that'll put you in the in the top, I don't remember exactly, 90th percentile of people who practice that, something like that. And it's funny, actually, I was thinking about what those things should be. Writing was an obvious one. Working on filmmaking was an obvious one. Working out was an obvious one. And I love that song. You can't hear it, sorry. How do I say this? I've heard many people talk about how working out and getting fit is important. And a lot of people don't understand really how much truth there is in that. Working out regularly feels so fucking good. And the challenge, physically and mentally, pushing yourself, like being drenched in sweat. It feels so fucking good. And the more you kind of stack up these good habits that are challenging, the less you want to do the bad habits. Where was I going? I forgot. That fucking song distracted me. Way of telling you everything. Yes, so I came up with those obvious ones. So the writing, working out. There was another one I don't remember. Sure, I should add stretching, but I wanted to do just 5. And I was thinking, I came up with multiple ideas, and I was like, I'm not sure. And I said drawing, and I realized, so drawing it's my first passion, the first thing I was passionate about and truly invested in. I think I've mentioned this on this podcast before, but it was also, it's one of those things. I'm really good at drawing, which, really good is subjective, and how do you kind of gauge that? I'm better than most, and I have most likely spent more than 10,000 hours drawing in my life. And there are many other things I would like to get good at. And so I think I'm lucky to be in a position where I am good at some things. And I have learned things in my life. And I don't know how you categorize. I guess you can categorize things by, I suppose you can learn skills, you can learn information. I don't know how you categorize them, but I don't know how you would categorize learning a language. So I was thinking about things I've learned in my life and I became good at. Now, I've learned to speak English, and I'm fluent in English. And I was thinking, of other things, because I was trying to, reverse engineer. How does it happen? What did I do? And how do I say this? I'm fluent in English, and there was a point where I didn't speak any English, So from that standpoint, how do I say this? So I should be, if I can apply the same technique to something else I want to learn, I should be able to learn it easily. It's a bit embarrassing to say, but on that list I put dancing. How do I say this? Because I think I would like to be able to be more comfortable in my body. And so 20 minutes every day, I'll watch YouTube videos and try to learn dance moves, and I'll practice the fuck out of them until I can, do them confidently, easy, simple ones. Then I'll build on top of that. But so, when I started today was my first day, and I think to myself, I look so wrong. I look so uncomfortable. It's like I have no natural ability for this. And, immediately the thought is, maybe I should just give up. But then I think to myself, 2023, 11 years ago, I arrived in a new country. I spoke not a single word of English. And now I'm fluent. Now, that was a long time ago, but I learned, I didn't learn after 11 years. I learned faster. And obviously, I was immersed in the language, so I learned quite quickly. But all this to say that at some point it did seem impossible. It seemed like, I remember a few days into school, I thought to myself, I'm fucked. How am I going to learn this? Everyone is, rambling. I don't know what they're saying. I don't know what's happening, and I'm not learning anything. And then out of nowhere, suddenly, a few months in, I was starting to be able to speak. And then a year later, or less, I was fluent. So I've been in a situation where it seemed impossible. And so there's many instances, of things I've learned. At some point I didn't know how to walk or talk, period, just talk. But I was immersed in the experience of learning to talk. Every day I was hearing people talk around me, and eventually I learned, slowly but surely I learned to talk. But the more I go back, and those experiences I had less control over the experience of learning. The younger I was, learning English was very much imposed on me. And it was almost like a survival mechanism. And before that, learning to speak and to walk were things that were imposed on me and that I I learn by default. And drawing, another thing that it was a form of escapism. As a kid, you have a lot of time on your hands, so I was able to do that. Learning to play basketball, things like that. So many things I've learned in the past. And so I'm thinking, what have I learned recently? It seems like the older you get, the less you learn things, or the less you... So the older you get, the less you have... How do I say this, actually? I mean, when you're a kid, you're bombarded with information. You know nothing, so you have to start somewhere. And also you want to learn more. But you don't really retain... You only retain the things that end up being more pertinent. Is that a word you can say in English, pertinent? I think so. I'm not sure at all. Yeah, pertinent. Applicable. You naturally hold on to the things, the information and the skills that are pertinent or applicable to your life. I suppose when you grow older, you start learning more, I guess, life lessons, more the way the world functions. But, I mean, I'm sure there's a graph somewhere that shows that the older you get, the less you learn, and the closer your horizon gets and your vision of the world, the more you start getting close-minded. And that's something I've noticed with older people, that they start settling on ideas and they refuse evolution and change. So here I am, I'm thinking, what have I learned recently? Not much. If you say in the last 2 years, yeah, there's some things that are really useful and that I'm proud of. But this year, nah, nothing. And I haven't really put myself in a situation consistently to learn things. So, some of the things that are, how do you say this? Some of the things, of the characteristics of all these things I've learned is consistency. Consistency. Consistency and discipline. These are the most important things. Consistency. And yeah, it's weird to think that I have to kind of organize myself so that I draw every day now, when that used to just be... Drawing was like breathing a few years ago. So I have a list of 5 things that I'll work on every day. To learn things. Yeah. I remember last week I was full of energy and hope, and I was saying, yeah, I'm going to do all these things. Whoopsie. Whoopsie. Whoopsie, whoopsie. What is that song? Every kind of people. But once again, how do I say this? I'll never kind of lose faith in the fact that I'll get where I need to be. And that everything is happening for a good reason. And that I have to be uncompromising. I guess you don't get anywhere without being ruthless. In one way or another. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, and I'll be back.